5 declining teams in the NBA. My name is Joshua Envyerz, and now that the regular season's over and the first round of the playoffs are wrapping up, we get to take a look at some of the teams that struggled this season and need to do some major changes if they want to continue that consistency. Starting off with the Portland Trail Blazers, who got swept in the first round of this year's NBA playoffs. This video is kind of going to suck for me to talk about because 2 of my favorite NBA teams are on this list. It's also cool though because I feel like I have a lot of things to say about it, but back when I saw CJ McCollum emerge as a solid scoring option for the Portland Trail Blazers and a nice complementary player to Damian Lillard, I think myself and a lot of other people said this isn't going to work out long term with these two because who's going to be playing the defense here? But that's long term thinking. I mean, this season they were able to win 49 games and were the 3rd best team in the Western Conference that was projected to be one of the toughest it ever has been. I remember talking to a friend on if the Spurs were going to make the playoffs, and I said their best bet of making the playoffs and advancing out the first round is if they go up against the Portland Trail Blazers, because the Portland Trail Blazers are the weakest top seed. Shouldn't necessarily be a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, and the sweep by the Pelicans proved it, because the Pelicans had a major injury in themselves in DeMarcus Cousins. The Spurs as well. No Kawhi Leonard throughout the majority of the year, and the Minnesota Timberwolves lost Jimmy Butler for quite some time near the end of the season. The Blazers deserved to be in the playoffs, but their supporting cast didn't show up to play. I mean, Evan Turner isn't Chandler Parsons with stealing money from his organization, but he's getting paid $17 million, and he isn't really quite living up to that. Same thing with guys like Mo Harkless, Al-Farouq Aminu, and Myers Leonard. 2 of these guys out of the 4 have to go next season, so they could clear up some cap, possibly add a 3rd option next to CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, and not overpay Yusuf Nurkic. Next, let's talk about the Detroit Pistons, who are completely overstacked when it comes to salary cap. Blake Griffin's getting paid the max contract, along with Andre Drummond. You could say both kind of deserving of the contracts they get, but when you look at their 3rd best player in Reggie Jackson, he's getting paid John Wall money for the next 2 seasons. And Reggie Jackson is not John Wall, that's for sure. A few years ago when I did my NBA preview, I think it was 3 years ago at this point, going on 4, when Stan Van Gundy took over the Detroit Pistons, I had the Pistons being one of the worst teams in the NBA, and people called me out saying I was an idiot, and they're going to make playoffs, and this is their time to shine. Truth be told, they proved me wrong. They made the 8th seed, and now the past 2 seasons I've been saying, all right, they're going to be good this season. They're going to be good. They made the 8th seed. They haven't been good, and they haven't made the playoffs since that 8th seed spot. When I say they're good, they're trash, and when I say they're trash, they're good. I don't know. But I remember people saying, oh, Stan Van Gundy's going to turn this team into the Orlando Magic with Dwight Howard. Andre Drummond's essentially going to be Dwight Howard, putting up Dwight Howard-esque numbers, and they're going to have a stretch 4. That's why we traded away Greg Monroe, but then they signed or trade for Blake Griffin this season. And although Blake Griffin is a better shooter, he's not necessarily a stretch 4, and you're kind of going back into that Greg Monroe, Andre Drummond role that they said that's the reason why they traded Greg Monroe, because they wanted a shooter to pair up with Andre Drummond. So I don't get what's going on in Detroit. I guess Stan Van Gundy just pulled this trade because he wanted a superstar, and this is like a 2K trade, and it might not work out for the Detroit Pistons in the long term. They got to move some pieces like Reggie Jackson, John Lure. They got to get some shooters because they're desperately lacking that. So we'll see what happens in the offseason, but right now it's not looking good next season for the Detroit Pistons. Let's stay in the East and talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is another one of those seasons where LeBron James might leave or he might stay. This is a ongoing thing with LeBron James because you don't know what he's going to do. Obviously, if he stays, they're going to be a playoff team no matter what. But if he leaves and he just walks with no sign and trade, the Cavs are in trouble, and they're going to be in the lottery next season, probably with the top 5 pick. I love George Hill, but he shouldn't be getting paid that much. J.R. Smith as well, and Tristan Thompson, he's gone. The Cavs need to find a way to trade at least 3 players I just mentioned and try to re-sign Rodney Hood. Rodney Hood could be a future starter for this team if the moment they ever decide to not play JR as much as they do. LeBron's team in his 4th year always look kind of sketchy, so we'll see what happens. And it's going to be interesting to see if he leaves Cleveland because he said it himself multiple times now. He doesn't have anything else to prove when it comes to winning championships and being MVP. So if he doesn't have anything else to prove, why try to go to a team and do said things like win championships? It's beyond me, but it's going to be an interesting offseason like it always is. Another team that had an interesting offseason this summer was the Charlotte Hornets, who looked like a playoff contending team with the trade for Dwight Howard. Nick Batum was having a solid year last season but got hurt early this season and wasn't the same player when he came back. Kind of same situation with Cody Zeller. Had to play the backup role to Dwight Howard and was injured for a good majority of this season. They're stacked up on bigs, so who knows if Zeller's going to be moved, Dwight Howard, along with Nicholas Batum. And most likely something's going to happen with Kemba Walker, who's going to be in his final year of his contract. He might get traded this offseason or at trade deadline with one of these said players, because the Charlotte Hornets aren't going anywhere, unfortunately. Even though if it looked like they were going to be a strong playoff contender in the East this year, it didn't happen. I feel like next season they're going to be back in the lottery, most likely with a top 15, top 10 pick. And it's going to be good for them because they probably won't have big contracts and they'd probably have traded away their star player by now and hopefully got some assets in the return, and also being able to play Malik Monk more, who showed out towards the end of the season when he actually got more minutes. Kemba Walker's definitely had a rough career with the Charlotte Hornets, and he's an all-star. He should be on a good team, at least making playoffs once in a while, and he hasn't done so with the Charlotte Hornets. Your third highest player shouldn't be Marvin Williams, and Dwight Howard necessarily isn't a max contract type of guy, which he isn't, but he's getting paid the most on this team, and he had a solid resurgence this year in Charlotte, but does it really matter if they're a losing team? Last but not least, let's talk about the San Antonio Spurs. A lot of controversy and talks about Kawhi Leonard this season that kind of overshadowed their amazing play and how LaMarcus Aldridge single-handedly carried this team to playoffs. Who knows what's going to happen with Kawhi Leonard this offseason? I'd hope he stays with the San Antonio Spurs, and hopefully this is all just one big misunderstanding, but the way the media is twisting it, it makes it really seem like Kawhi Leonard wants out and wants to be traded. So the good news, if Kawhi Leonard gets traded, is obviously teams are going to be willing to give up young assets or draft picks, and finally the Spurs will be able to get younger. The bad news is they won't have a star caliber player to help lead them, and they'll probably be an 8 seed, 7 seed once again, or even out of the playoffs next season if they do that. Now, if he does stay, which I absolutely hope he does, a lot of things have to change with the roster. Pau Gasol, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, most likely are all coming back next season. And if they don't, it's going to be sad, but it's also going to be awesome to see the next generation for the San Antonio Spurs, because they're not the same players as they once were, besides obviously Manu Ginobili, who's killing it in playoffs right now. And outside of DeJounte Murray, they have no young talent on the come up. People say it every year. This is the year the Spurs start to take a step back. This is the year the Spurs are out of the playoffs. And I've been grateful enough to live my entire life without seeing the San Antonio Spurs outside of the playoffs. They've been making playoffs the entirety time I've been alive, and it's getting kind of scary because I might, in a few years, see them out of the playoffs with the lottery pick. But it's also exciting because I've never had a team that I rooted for be bad. So it's going to be great and sad and terrible. And that's why they're on this list, because you don't know the future of Kawhi Leonard. And although you'd hope he stays, who knows at this point?
I'm coasting, slow motion, but I'm focused. Till I run it down, take notice, never comes down. I just elevate. Got the power of a solar. You already know that I'm a soldier. Watch me brush this dirt up off my shoulder. Blowing doja till it's over.